You work in sports media, or you have, and one of the easiest things to do is to become absorbed with your work. In that chase for glory, your life seemingly revolves around what you do from an occupation standpoint. And that was the path of Stacie McCollum as she was rising the ranks in the biz. And right now she is vice president of content at Draft Kings. But there came for her an internal shift where she realized that she could be really good at her work, but also make room for family and being a mom. How she did that in a conversation that brings about depth and empathy is going to be the focal point of our conversation here. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and work with Tennis Channel and ESPN for volleyball and other networks for other sports. But this is a place where we're going to tell the personal side and that story of Stacie in a way that's never been done before. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Here's my chat with Stacie. She is a driving force in the world of sports, media, and betting. It is Stacie McCollum joining me, Vice President of Content at Draft Kings. And we're going to share her story in a unique way. We're going to learn about her career, but also go into the personal side. A mom, formerly a volleyball player. We're going to have a lot of fun diving into that backstory as well. I'm Bryan Fenley with a variety of different networks doing sports for them on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Stacie, thanks so much for doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun. I know you've done quite a few interviews, but we're going to learn about the human side of you as well. So this should be very rewarding, I think, for both of us.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for your patience as we tried to get this scheduled.
Well, your schedule is nonstop. Obviously, right now you have a lot of responsibilities. And I wanted to start here. I remember I think it was 2019, and you got to participate in the pregame coin toss of, what was it, the Clemson Georgia Tech game. So you're out there. You're with the ACC network at that point. How nervous were you being out there having to undergo quite an important task?
It's funny that you brought that up. I was thinking about that in the context of maybe this interview. I was terrified. I was very excited. What was so special about that day, though, was that was the first football game on the ACC network, and just about an hour before, ACC network had actually signed a deal with Dish, and so it was nerve-wracking just to think about going out on the field and doing the coin toss. But there was a lot of excitement because we had expanded the distribution at that point for the channel, and they went live just in time for that game. But I remember leaving the field. Eric McLean was out there with me as well, who does work for ESPN and ACC Network, and he is a former Clemson player. And I lost track of everyone else. They knew to get off the field very quickly, and all of a sudden I turned around and the team's coming at me, and Dabo was walking over. So it was a lot of fun, but I very quickly became out of my element.
So did you have a chance did Dabo look at you, or what did he say, or was he in his own element as he was getting ready for the
Yeah,
game?
he
And
was kind of in his element. It was kind of like, you're not supposed to be here. It's time to get off the field. Although during the time that we worked, and we worked very closely with Clemson around the launch of the channel, he was fantastic. But at that particular moment in time, it was more like, okay, we're locked in. It's time to get this stuff over with and clear the field.
the idea for you, and that must have been a really cool experience. But what I notice about you, Stacie, is you're very strong-willed, and I think that that's played a big part in the trajectory of your career. Where do you feel like you learned to be that way?
It's a good question. I think most of it has to do with my upbringing. My father was in the Air Force. We traveled quite a bit as I was younger, growing up. My mom was a school teacher for a period of time. She also was an administrator overseeing transportation for a school district. She was a former athlete. So I think moving as much as we did required me to have to be flexible and nimble, and adapt to different changes and environments. And then two, also growing up with a mom who loved sports, was an athlete herself. She taught me how to throw a softball. We used to play catch all the time. I think it really came from just kind of the upbringing, which was a great way to grow up. But I think it really kind of stems from there.
The athletic pursuits of one Stacie McCollum led you all the way to playing in college volleyball.
Good.
The amount of credit that you throw to your mom for helping you get to that state, how much would that be?
A lot. I mean, certainly she was the one who introduced me to sports, and my father is a huge sports fan as well. I should definitely say that. But you know, my favorite team is the Denver Broncos on the NFL side. And that's because my mom loved the Denver Broncos, and that's where she and my father met. So I really, I know a lot of kids, and my daughter's a good example. She has inherited her love for the Kansas City Royals from my husband, but I inherited that love for sports really from my mother. And so I was a good high school volleyball player, and an okay college player. I probably rode the bench a little bit more. But when I got to college, everybody else was so much taller than I was, even though I was playing for a small school. But a lot of it comes from my mom, just a shared interest in sports. My grandmother actually played basketball in college growing up in Texas. I have an aunt who played for Jody Conrad, who at Southwest Texas when that was her first job. I'm sorry, Sam Houston State, her first job before being the legendary basketball coach at University of Texas. So kind of just grew up, was in our blood and in our DNA.
If we go back to, and you said, surely you would have loved to have played more when it came to volleyball in college, but that idea that you didn't, how do you think that that might have inspired the post athletic pursuits as you got into the world of sports, that there was an extra source of motivation that you maybe could have carried from that college experience into what then launched your career?
Well, I think one thing that developed out of not playing very much was I became very sarcastic very quickly as a defense mechanism, and so a good sense of humor and a lot of sarcasm. But I've often said, and even when I talk to young people who are getting out in their careers, I was never probably the smartest in the room, and certainly was not the best volleyball player on the court. But I do think, particularly early in my career, I outworked a lot of people. And so I know that work ethic and determination and persistence are all things that we always try to instill in, whether it's our kids or we try to teach in leadership positions within our respective organizations. But I really think that was a differentiator for me growing up, was I just worked hard. I kind of kept my nose down, worked hard, and then always believed that good things would come if I worked hard enough.
That you have. Stacie McCollum is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. The fact is, in you working as hard as you have, it's opened up so many doors for you. The ability for you then to parlay that into being so, first of all, adaptable to different scenarios in your career, that you've taken on different things. The idea of having to be open to nuances and differences of where you've worked. It seems as if you really are a sponge and you're flexible to whatever is out there. How do you think that the work ethic then plays into your ability to be open to change, which has also been fundamental to where your life and your career has taken you?
Well, I think I've had to be open to change. And in one thing in my career, I've also seemed to gravitate towards change and to launches. And so if you look at the last 10 to 12 years of my career, whether it was Longhorn Network or ACC Network, or now even the job with Draft Kings, it really all was about change and about the opportunity to build something. And so I know in the interview you spoke with Dan Margulis, he talked about just his passion for also building versus maintaining. And I think I can echo that in a lot of ways. And that's why the move to DraftKings was so exciting, in that it's a space that I've not ever been in. I lived in a very linear, traditional media space for a very long time, recognizing where consumer habits are going and the convergence of sports betting. It just seemed like the right time in my career to almost take a little bit of a chance on myself, and take an opportunity to work with a brand that is leading in terms of the gaming industry and help them build out their media vertical. So again, change seems to be, again, something like maybe a moth to a flame a little bit. I keep just kind of chasing after it.
Change and then wanting to challenge yourself.
Mhm.
How much do you feel that that helps engage you in what you do?
It does. Now, listen, I will tell you, there are moments in time where it's great to be comfortable. We have a lot going on in life, particularly during COVID. That was difficult, but I think challenging myself is an important one. And I had a mentor, a colleague, Rosalind Durant, who would always say, you have to be uncomfortable you have to get comfortable getting uncomfortable. And that is something that I have tried to do. And certainly at times, it's manifested itself in different ways. But I think certainly stepping into this new role was designed to really challenge me in a new and different way, and to get very uncomfortable, because it is not a space, particularly on the gaming side, that I knew well stepping in.
Another role that you take is I've noticed and I feel is inspiring is that you stand up for what you believe is right and, strong convictions. Why have
I
you
do.
taken that route?
Well, I think we have to, right now. I think using your voice is important. And listen, I only have 300 followers on Twitter, so my voice is not that big in the social media space. But it's taken me a long time to probably find the right path and the right way to use my voice. And again, when I think about conversations I have with young people, it's easy to give that advice. It's also very difficult to sometimes take your own advice and use your
Hmm.
voice. But there are a lot of issues that are very near and dear to my heart right now. A lot that impact sports, a lot that just impact my life, impact my daughter. But I'm pretty vocal when it comes to the things that I know will are important to making a better world, particularly for my daughter. And so I think about the issues on the table right now and living in a world that, in many ways, rights are very different than what even I had growing up. And so I think finding your voice in the right way, to use your voice, is incredibly important.
How is it used to make that world better for your daughter?
Well, she's 13, so being her advocate, whether she likes it or not, sometimes is really important. Challenging her as well to make sure that she's taking into consideration, particularly social media, things that she may post now versus what she may want posted out there in the future. I do serve on the board of our regional YMCA. That's an important piece of trying to give back that I do and contributing in the community. And then I think I also try to mentor as much as I can. And so I will from time to time put a few things out in social media. I'm not a very active social media user, but I do try to, around my sphere of influence and how I contribute in the community, use that voice to try to make change.
You've made change, you are making change. How does your family, your nuclear family, how does it center you?
Well, they are my everything. And there was a period of time, particularly early in my career, where I didn't think I was just career track, career path. I was going to be single. I was going to work. I didn't want kids. I didn't even know how to deal with kids. I would go to gatherings and I'm like, why did kids want to talk to me? Like, oh, they just, you know, but things change when you meet the right person. And having my daughter and my husband, they really are my everything. Not a day goes by where the entire work schedule, everything I do, has to be centered around soccer schedule, the things that we have to do. I was talking to one of our baseball contributors, Jared Carabas, a couple days ago, and I said, Jared, I have this really cool job where I work for Draft Kings, but make no mistake, I am a soccer mom, like through and through. And so she really is. My daughter grounds me and everything. I get up in the morning, try to make breakfast, pack lunch, help her do her hair, because now at a 13-year-old age, it's all about hair and makeup. And I love starting my day that way because, those are probably the only moments during the day that we get a ton of time together, because the rest of the day just moves so quickly on to the next.
What kind of soccer mom are you?
I am a good soccer mom. I am not incredibly vocal. I mean, I am. I cheer a lot, but I don't tend to yell at the refs. I don't tend to get too worked up. However, we were at a tournament a couple weeks ago where there was a team from New York, and their parents kept wanting to come on our sideline, which is just a no-no. Like they were like standing in between our parents, which is just a huge no-no. And so I may have uttered a few words like, "Hey, let's go back to your side." But no, I'm a pretty good soccer mom, I think. I cheer a lot. I'm very positive.
How do you feel like you have used and shown that that positivity has influenced your daughter?
Well, I think and I try to make sure that I'm setting a good example, because if you can see it, you can be it. And just like we spend a lot of time talking, and much more so now than we were even a year ago, but about giving women and women's sports the exposure that they are due. And we're seeing the results of that across the industry in terms of ratings going up and more advertisers coming on board. And so I try to through my work, I try to, even on down days, make sure that, she doesn't have too much visibility in that, because there's always going to be good days and bad days. But I want her to just understand that she can do anything she wants. And I'm hoping that she sees me going to sporting events or sees me working, and the experiences that I had, that she knows that that path is the same for her.
That path that you have taken and where it's led you into different networks and where you are now with DraftKings. But you hit on something really interesting, Stacie, where earlier you mentioned how there was this one track mind that, you're going to be single, work, 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 work. When did that switch come for you, when you realized deeply that life is important when it comes to work, but that there is this something else, and you allowed yourself to be open to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In 2004, when I was at the NHL, I was part of the lockout at that point, and lockout with the players and the owners. And so that ended up impacting probably about 70% of the NHL office staff at that point. And I was one of those. And I remember, even though I was very fortunate at that time to rebound quickly and get a job with ESPN in 2005, I had a hard time figuring out who I was at that moment in time. My identity at that point had been so wrapped up in my career. I was Stacie. I worked at the NHL. I always used to wear gray suits because black fades and white gets too dirty. So it was always me in a gray suit. And I realized when I stepped away from that, or it was taken away from me, actually, I lost a piece of myself, because I had really wrapped my identity in that job and what I was doing. And I loved it so much. And then moved to Bristol, Connecticut, had a great job with ESPN immediately in programming, and then started to branch out and do some other things, get involved in Special Olympics. And then coincidentally, that's where I did meet my husband through a team ESPN volunteer event. And so that really kind of opened my eyes to one, I didn't want to be so singular in terms of just that one track mind. And I think it opened up my heart and my mind a little bit more after reconciling kind of the loss of my job at that point.
How do you think, though, being able to open up your mind the way you did, in comes your husband, that actually has made you better at your job, your work, your focus, your creativity, and the implementation of ideas that you have in that space?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one, it just gives me a different perspective. And two, I think it's improved my quality of life, in that I have to make time for other things outside of work. But yes, certainly looking at sports through his lens, and he's in production. And so I've learned a lot from him just through whether it be feature production or studio production, but also through consumption habits. The way that my daughter consumes content and watches programming is very different than we did. And that goes for sports too. She is content watching a sporting event on her iPad or watching it on her phone. Whereas, 10 or 15 years ago, I don't think we would ever even imagine that people would be comfortable with that or willing to do that. So they certainly have impacted kind of how I approach business, how I think about it, and then watching the evolution of the consumption habits and seeing it through her eyes and lens has helped dramatically. Absolutely.
With all of that said, and being open to seeing the business through the lenses of your husband and your daughter and those around you, with all that can be work, how do you check in with yourself?
I wish I checked in more probably with myself. But when I do, I love yoga. I love hot yoga. That is definitely a means of escape for me. I'm also a big runner, so I do enjoy running. But a lot of time checking in with myself these days means after everybody goes to bed and dishes are done and dog is uh, dog is fed, I usually just end up on my phone, just trying to catch up with the news of the day, but also just decompressing. And that's when I also spend a little time trying to see what some of the competitors are doing. I feel like that's that first moment in time where, although it should be about myself at that point, I'm kind of just checking out what else is happening. But other things, we're big hikers. We're getting ready for a trip to the Grand Canyon in a week, and so we try to check in that way as a family. It usually means having to get away for a bit, but yeah, when I can find the time, that's kind of where we go, what we do.
How much do you find that when you get to the Grand Canyon that you're going to tell yourself, okay, this is a break. I don't have to think about work, but just knowing the way in which your mind works, which has led you to so many great things. But how challenging do you think it'll be to be in that space and be in awe of nature and all that it provides in its splendor to say, okay, I can just wait a little bit before I need to answer that email, or I can give myself a moment, like you said, to refresh and to be able to deprogram.
I am planning on putting the phone down. I think I need to, one, for just that recharge, but two, I'm hoping there's no cell service, so we're not as good as cell service, so I don't have the excuse. But no, this is a big trip, so we've been planning it for a while, and so I know I'll be able to. And the other reason I know that is we've got a great team, and we've got a lot of great things happening on the media side at DraftKings right now. But the team is in a great position. We have great leaders on the team, so I know I will be able to do that.
I want to ask you this one last question, Stacie. How has your life, or specifically your career, been like one big hike?
Wow, that's a good question, Brian. Well, I think for a good portion of my career, it was very much a steep hill
Mm.
where I continued to climb, continued to look for opportunities to grow, get promoted. What's the next job after the next job? And it's, very symbolic to climbing the ladder. But then I think there are moments where there are plateaus where you may make a change, or you may be on a hike, and in order to really see what is out there, you don't have to climb anymore, or you don't have to climb all the time. You can maybe travel across some of the flatlands and see some of the beautiful nature and the other things that exist. It certainly, for me at this point in time, it's more about the journey and the hike, and less about the title. And I just want to continue to learn and grow and take it all in. And I guess, yeah, I guess it's kind of like that.
Yeah, I think that's so well put, because it's like you'll get to these spots up the mountain, and I would think for you now, you're spending more time sightseeing and appreciating what's
Yes,
around you,
absolutely.
and saying, "Oh my goodness, we're at the top of this peak. Let's let this sit in with us. Let's really experience this to the fullest and really feel where we are right now and what beauty is around us." And to see that, and to see the way in which you are doing great work over at DraftKings is why it was such an honor to have you on this conversation platform. An inspiring story, and so cool to tap into your psyche and to learn about the change. It's so fascinating, I think, as well, Stacie, to hear how there was this one mindset that you had going into the biz, and how there was this openness, this shift, and where you were able to still do incredible work, but at the same time appreciate life and all that it brings as well. And it's a cool duality that you've been able to really master and get a hold of. For Stacie McCollum, I'm Bryan Fenley, of course, Stacie, Vice President Content at Draft Kings. Thanks so much for the open conversation and really learning about you in a way that maybe other interviews wouldn't, but getting a sense of really understanding your depth and where your life has taken you in such a transparent way. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor. I really enjoyed it.